exfil. Now.
What's going on, everybody? This is dkdynamite for a very important video here for you guys today regarding the truth about Call of Duty's success, which games have actually been performing well, and also what it means for the future. Definitely stay tuned. But before we jump into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below, drop a like, and make sure you have notifications on to stay up to date with everything going on in Cold War Year 2, Warzone, Modern Warfare 2, and any other future Call of Duty as well. Late last night, I posted a pretty lengthy video regarding the brand new Cold War Year 2 updates and everything going on with Jungle Remastered, the new Lazar bundle, and the brand new UGR SMG across every single game mode. I reviewed it and had hell of a time, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But I want to start off this video with a tweet that I put out last night, and we're going to start going into the context of why I'm making this video and also the evidence that the information presented is in fact accurate. So out of nowhere yesterday, I tweeted this out, and I'll explain why in a second, but here's what I said. It's almost propaganda how people claim Modern Warfare is the most successful Call of Duty when the data literally says otherwise. Regardless of it, we're all on the same team and shouldn't be so hostile over which game we prefer, but the copium towards Black Ops Cold War's success is comical and debunked. And if you guys are like, wait, what data and what do you mean debunked? Well, here's the thing, right? Nero Cinema posted a video late last night, which I want to follow up on and respond to. I have his video linked down below in the description for you guys to watch after you guys hopefully finish watching this one, in which he reveals the actual data behind which Call of Duties have been successful and which haven't been. So what he's claiming first and foremost is that the data Activision has presented over the last couple of years in their investors calls isn't accurate. And here's the thing, if that's not accurate, then I'm assuming there's some legal troubles involved there, right? You can't just lie on an investors call, but will you really put it past Activision? Because looking at all the other things they've done, it honestly wouldn't surprise me at this point, but I'm not making any accusations or accusing them of anything. I'm just stating what I think about the data that got presented to us last night. He's claiming this information can be found on the internet, and I'll go back to that in a second, trust me. We'll talk about the legitimacy behind this data, but when you look at the data itself, we look at the numbers from Black Ops 3 over to World War II, and then going into Modern Warfare 2019, which seems to have provided the biggest dip in Call of Duty history to player retention, the player base, right? And keep in mind, this data does represent the player base without Call of Duty Mobile, but with Warzone support once that released. It also takes the pandemic into account, and you will see that Modern Warfare wasn't doing great, yet on an investors call a couple of years ago, Activision presented data that made that game look extremely well, but they didn't disclose that that was actually including the COD mobile player base as well. The real data does not look anything like that. So if you guys are like, wait a second, what does this mean? Well, according to this data, it looks like Black Ops Cold War actually provided the biggest peak for the player base, and it looks like it kept player retention for a fair amount of time, and it looks like the pandemic actually didn't help Call of Duty like Activision claimed with the lockdowns, but Call of Duty was at a steady decline even with the lockdowns, even with people being at home. So what this ultimately comes down to is the publicly available data for Call of Duty's player retention, and then subtracting the publicly available data for COD Mobile's player retention from the initial number for Call of Duty altogether, and that's how you come to the player counts for the premium Call of Duties that still will include Warzone, as we'll get to in a second, but that's what we're dealing with if the data is in fact accurate, which I believe it is, and I'll get back to that. But that just means that Activision didn't exactly present the data in the correct way, which again, I would not be surprised about. And yeah, Warzone definitely provided a boost to the Modern Warfare lifecycle, everybody knows that, but definitely not the boost that people were thinking that it was. People thought a lot more about Modern Warfare's lifecycle. The game was down tragically before the launch of Warzone. People out there still don't want to admit that. But before we dive even deeper into this data, I'm sure you guys have a couple of questions which I also had after watching Nero's video, because in Nero's video he says that all this can be found online and doesn't really go in depth from there. And I'm sure the questions you guys have are, wait, who's the source behind this data? How did this leak out? Who has access to this data? Why did Activision lie? And like I said, I was asking those same questions, but upon further analysis, a lot of us out there did some research, looked into where the data came from, and here's a great explanation from the Big Daddy Fish over on Reddit. The player count charts come from Derek Strickland on Twitter, and his @'s down below in the description. He is a gaming industry financial analyst. The COD Mobile player counts are available through Google search, and you can even see the play count month by month since its release. The actual chart from the post was created by Nero Cinema, who took the data on COD Mobile and subtracted their quarterly player count from the total player count charts supplied by Strickland. Assuming all this information is accurate, it tells what the community has suspected for a long time, that COD has been in a downward trend since Activision has implemented their EOMM algorithm, and despite their massive sales or profit, customer satisfaction in COD is at an all-time low. Edit. How Strickland gained access to the info, I have no idea. I can't say it's entirely accurate, but if it is, COD is down bad. So again, I don't care what game sold the most, whether it's Black Ops Cold War, whether it's Modern Warfare 2019, if it was Vanguard even, I don't care about that because it's not relevant to this data here. This data is looking at the player count and player retention. What if somebody out there just went ahead and bought 1,000 copies of Modern Warfare, but didn't touch one of them or didn't give them away to anybody? What do those sales really mean? We're talking about the player count, people that were playing the game actively during these quarters while the games were in their prime. So if this data ends up getting disproven, I will make a follow-up video to correct everything that I'm saying here, but until further notice, I do trust that this data is legit because it's what I also suspected for quite some time, and not because I'm a Cold War fanboy or a Treyarch shill. Look, call me whatever you want in the comments as long as it's not too bad. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with criticism, right? Say whatever, but at least hear me out first for the rest of this video before saying that or jumping to conclusions, because I'm not making this video from the perspective of somebody that just doesn't like Modern Warfare or wants to celebrate that the game was down tragically. That's not what this is at all. Let's just talk about the truth here. So let's also take a look back at what I remember personally from Modern Warfare's life cycle as a content creator, right? A very small one at the time, but I was observing the community quite a bit, looking at how things were going. And what I remember is that right before Warzone came out, we're talking about early season 1, Modern Warfare 2019, not only was the criticism through the roof for that game's multiplayer, Spec Ops was already dead because that game mode was down tremendously, but if you look at just the multiplayer, there was so much criticism, right, about dead silence, about the minimap, about the gunplay, about the weapon balancing, about the map design. People were very vocal everywhere, Twitter, Reddit. Nobody was really happy. And if you look at content creators' performances, I remember seeing people out there doing so poorly when it comes to their uploads and their live streams that people out there were jumping ship. I remember, I think it was Hollow that stopped doing COD full time, became a variety channel. Nero Cinema quit covering COD entirely for a whole year because of his distaste for the game, and he went and got a real job. And so many other channels out there experienced the same thing, right? Numbers were not looking good. And I get it. I'll make it clear, neither YouTube nor Twitch reflect a game's success, but sometimes they do echo how good a game is doing pretty decently. I would say YouTube more than Twitch though, because Twitch obviously numbers can be skewed. If a big streamer out there just goes live with a certain game, then that puts the game at the top of the gaming category for the day. I get that, but for YouTube, I mean, you can definitely tell if a game is popular when views are skyrocketing for videos and live streams, but I get it. It's not all about social media when it comes to a game's success. I understand that. Now, the other thing too is about the pandemic, right? It's also been something that I think we've all just accepted, that the lockdowns helped gaming or social media in general. More people were at home, more people were on their phones, more people were on their game consoles, people were spending money online if they had any. I think that's been something that we all just accepted because we've heard it so many times, but the data says that COD was still in a downward spiral when the lockdowns hit, and Warzone helped it a little bit, but not that much in comparison to what we heard from the investors' calls that, you know, Modern Warfare saved the franchise, the best-selling, best-performing Call of Duty ever. That is not the case at all, and if anything, it was Black Ops Cold War that took the franchise in the right direction. And I know you guys can say, oh, well, is it because of Warzone, right? Did Warzone do it? And look, I've seen 100 excuses by now on Twitter, on Reddit, about why Black Ops Cold War did so successful, and I'll give you guys the most logical reasons as to why, but yes, Warzone did play a part in that. However, if you want to say that Warzone was the only reason Cold War did good, then why didn't it boost Modern Warfare the same way it boosted Cold War? It doesn't make sense. You could say, oh, well, it was the meta weapons, people like the Cold War weapons better. Where's the proof of that? I would love to see some data to support that, because right now it just shows that Black Ops Cold War was a stronger game and resonated better with the community, and Warzone just boosted that. But if Warzone was the sole reason why, then are you saying that seasons 2 through 6 for Modern Warfare were just that bad in comparison to the 6 seasons of Cold War for the Warzone integration? Because that's a bold claim as well. And it's also crazy how when Cold War saw the biggest peak with 104 million players, that was before Verdansk 84 even came out. So that was still Modern Warfare's Verdansk at the time, which is insane. Now, it is ironic that Activision was indeed okay with coming out with some bold claims throughout seasons 1 and 2 of Cold War by saying that the most amount of battle passes and most players ever were present during those 2 seasons of Cold War's life cycle. So at least that somewhat backs up the information that we're looking at from the publicly available data about how successful Cold War really was. When you look at, it's because Infinity Ward still had to come in and save Call of Duty with Warzone. I don't care who made Warzone. I don't care if it was Beanox, Raven, Demonware, Toys for Bob. I don't care who made it. A free-to-play COD will be inevitably boosting any premium COD that gets integrated with that moving forward. Everybody knows that, but the quality of Modern Warfare is ultimately what led to its downfall and what led to the fact that Warzone had to kind of carry the rest of that game's life cycle, whereas Black Ops Cold War managed to have a pretty solid Warzone integration. It was received fairly well. Yeah, there were some problems, but the game was solid on its own 2 feet with a pretty active multiplayer and zombies and healthy DLC updates. And what I could also add to that is that people probably still played Modern Warfare once Warzone came out, and Warzone might have helped Modern Warfare because of the ability to level up your weapons that you can then use in Warzone, right? It was fast to level up your weapons in multiplayer? I don't know. Spec Ops had a XP exploit. It probably did. That was it. And if you say that's the same reason why Cold War did so good, then why are the numbers so much bigger? Why does Cold War look that much better? Did people out there really care about leveling up those weapons? Yeah, they did. But that's not the sole reason why Cold War was on top with the peak here with 100+ million human beings. Now, even if you want to say, Warzone's the reason why the data looks like this, well, hey, if Warzone wasn't successful or never came out, guess what Treyarch had lined up for Black Ops Cold War? It was Blackout 2 with the map being the Ural Mountains. We have so much evidence of that. Now, gameplay is out there of the canceled experience, but once Activision saw how successful Warzone was, they canceled Blackout 2 entirely. So I'm really wondering what these numbers would have looked like without Warzone altogether. I'm really curious, but what I would know for sure, and I think we can all guess this, is that Blackout 2 would have been significantly better than the first one. They would have learned from all their mistakes from the first one. It would have incorporated so many new features and so many improvements that might have allowed Black Ops Cold War to still see similar numbers with a peak in the player count just because of the Ural Mountains alone. And maybe that would have also been a free-to-play experience where you didn't have to buy the game like Black Ops 4 to play that game's Battle Royale. And I think regardless of what studio or what game included a Battle Royale, I still think a free-to-play Call of Duty experience is bound to bang regardless of how bad it is. Now, something else to actually consider is the Activision lawsuit, right? People out there are like, oh my god, look at Black Ops Cold War's dip, right? It dropped dramatically towards the end of the game's life cycle. All Call of Duties do that. It's just the COD cycle at this point. All Call of Duties do that. People get hyped for the next game, except this past time around with Cold War's dip, people out there weren't really that excited for Vanguard, and we'll get back to that in a second. But don't forget about the Activision Blizzard lawsuit and the allegations that surfaced towards, I think it was end of Season 4, early Season 5 of Black Ops Cold War. That 100% hurt that game as well. You could say, it's just excuses, but no, that hurt a lot of games. I think almost every game under the Activision umbrella. I remember very clearly, for content creators, it was a rough couple of weeks when the information first came out, because everybody out there is like, oh my god, are you supporting Activision by covering this game? And I'm not going to go into that again, but yeah, the community did not respond well to those allegations in the lawsuit, to where it definitely dramatically hurt every Activision property. But if you ask me, what is the real reason why Black Ops Cold War saw numbers like this? And aside from Warzone giving it a boost, which I'm sure that it did, I'm not saying that it didn't, I definitely think zombies also plays a very big part in this. And maybe not even just zombies, but a very replayable PvE mode, a third mode for the game, which Modern Warfare did not have. Vanguard also does not have, right? Modern Warfare Spec Ops flopped, Vanguard Zombies broken, incomplete. We all know the story with that. And I also want to say that Outbreak was definitely more successful than people want to admit. Not saying it's going to replace round-based, not saying that it's even better than round-based, but it was definitely more successful and has been for the last, 9 to 10 months since it's been out. I think that's been the case. I mean, they made a perk tailored around Outbreak, Death Perception. It still works in round-based, but the fact they went out of their way to really support Outbreak with a lot of healthy updates just shows you how successful it was. I think the name Black Ops alone will also help it, and I think Treyarch just does so much better with the marketing, with their roadmaps, the DLC releases, the frequency of updates. They just release very fire content as often as they can. I think that's always been something they've done better than Infinity Ward or Sledgehammer. I don't know, you guys are probably thinking, well, what about all the free trials that Cold War got? And yeah, that's a good point. I think you could actually use that as an argument for one side or another. You could say, oh, the game was doing poor, they did a bunch of free trials to help it. Or you could say the game was doing so good that Activision's like, let's juice it a little bit more, see how far we can extend things, see how many more people we can get on board to play the game and encourage them to buy bundles. You also have to remember that Cold War's item shop with the microtransactions and just the skins and the mastercrafts, all of that has been far more superior than any cosmetic offered in MW or even Vanguard. So that's another reason people out there might have been like, hey, I'm liking what they're doing with this shop here, let me spend some more money and play this game even longer with the new skins that I bought. That's also a reason why. Now I'm gonna go back to content creation for a second, right? Just for this segment again. If anybody out there is like, oh, well, during Cold War, I was seeing very bad numbers for my videos and my live streams and whatnot, and I was seeing better numbers than MW. Well, here's the reality, right? Looking at how good these numbers are, either your audience specifically only likes Modern Warfare, because that could be the case too. I know my audience definitely prefers trailer content over anything else. I get that. I understand where you're coming from with that. Or you just weren't making the right content, because if you were trying to rely on a content style that might be outdated, or a content style that may have worked well in Black Ops 3 and 4 but not Cold War, then you were doing something wrong. And hey, in the content creation world, sometimes and most of the time, I think as a creator, we're doing something wrong if things aren't working out. Well, yeah, there's excuses where maybe the game's doing that poor, like Vanguard, or YouTube broke, the algorithm's messed up. Yeah, we could talk about that too, but I think this is definitely an example of how everybody out there should have, if they didn't, took advantage of Black Ops Cold War if they wanted to go ahead and make some quality content and grow their audience or business. And I'll also add zombies content and that scene entirely to this, because I think a lot of bigger zombies creators really slept on not only Black Ops 4, but especially Cold War. Looking at these numbers, if they actually put in the effort to make quality content and new original content that wasn't just direct copy paste of the stuff they made in 2016, they also would have done better. But because they didn't apply themselves and really try, not everybody, but some of them, you know what I mean, but because some of them didn't do that, they didn't see really any growth during Cold War, and they slept on it quite a bit, and now they're just miserable. I mean, I talked about that before, but that's really what's going on here. They just weren't making the right content. A lot of smaller channels blew up during Cold War. Why do you think so? I mean, I was kind of one of them as well, right? Not tooting my own horn here, but lots of other channels out there really blew up with Black Ops Cold War, and why do you think that was the case? Look at the numbers here, right? But now I guess we could sit back and realize, hey, is Modern Warfare 2 really going to be the savior of the franchise? Well, like I said before, Modern Warfare 2019 came out at a very convenient time, right? COD wasn't doing so great, the lockdowns happened, and it introduced all these new models with the battle passes, free DLC, the seasonal structure, crossplay, and then Warzone sometime after. And even with all of that, the game still wasn't doing great. But MW2 is about to come out at a pretty desperate time when Cold War Year 2 is pretty much carrying this year right now, as well as these Warzone crossovers. Modern Warfare 2 is supposed to come in and revive the franchise, right? And sure, I think it's going to be successful, and I definitely think the name alone will help out a lot, and hopefully a lot of the changes they make with the gameplay, since a lot of criticism out there for the first MW, they should probably listen to that for the second one. I'm sure it'll be fine. People out there give the first MW way too much credit, and I see a very common statement on Twitter and Reddit from certain people that are like, oh, well, Cold War was a step backwards, that's why it did worse. Data says otherwise, and first of all, COD Cold War was not a step backwards. It was a step in a different direction. It wasn't trying to be a Modern Warfare clone with the same movement and the same slide canceling in the gameplay. Vanguard also likely would not have been a Modern Warfare clone if Sledgehammer actually had time to make that game, but with the time they had, all they had time to do was essentially reskin MW, nerf slide canceling, and incorporate some other features that I'm sure will also be in Modern Warfare 2. But the copium I'm seeing about this data is hilarious, and I'll go more in depth with the copium on the podcast later this Friday. I just think it's crazy. You can present people data that's verifiable from reliable human beings, even if it was posted by Activision. People out there still wouldn't believe it, and I get it. You have a bias towards a certain game or a certain playstyle, keep it. But when it comes to data like this, which is being proven time and time again by a lot of really informative people, then you just gotta accept it. And if it was the other way around, where Cold War looked bad and Modern Warfare looked better, I would still talk about it, whether it's in a video, on a podcast. I'm okay with talking about it. Like I said, we're all on the same team here supporting Call of Duty, but we have to be upfront about what these games are really doing in terms of success and what expectations we should set for future releases from a similar series like Modern Warfare, like Black Ops. We have to be real here about what's going on. But we could put on our tinfoil hats and theorize as to why Activision will lie about this data. I mean, obviously they want to look the best as possible on their investors' calls, but you could even go ahead and theorize, hey, if the data is true, then does Activision just want to make sure they gas up MW2 the most that they can before the Microsoft acquisition potentially goes through, so they really go out with a bang. Not sure if that even matters. I mean, looking at the recent statements, they're really going hard and saying that, hey, Vanguard performed very poorly, not enough innovation, and the player retention in Vanguard has been so bad that it affected Warzone Pacific and Caldera. So they're already trying to set the tone that Vanguard is literally at the bottom, and they want to make you know that MW2 is supposed to revive everything, and I guess that's smart. Business 101. They want to make sure their investors are pleased and feel confident in future releases, that they're going to invest all that money into the upcoming Call of Duty releases. And I'm sure you're also wondering, will Activision even try to dispute this data? Maybe. If they do, like I said, I'll make a follow-up video to this one, but they might even just ignore this, sweep it under the rug, and say, hey, let's just move on with the rest of our week. But I think the moral of the story here as well is that COD Mobile has actually done more for Call of Duty in the past couple of years since its release than the premium titles have. Also, connecting that with how Candy Crush has done a hell of a lot, actually more than Call of Duty for Activision. So with that being said, without the COD Mobile data, that's what things look like. That's the information we have presented to us. Hopefully that makes things clear for everybody out there that's still coping about the success of Black Ops Cold War. But that is about it. This has been dkdynamite. Leave all your thoughts down below in the comment section. What are your thoughts on the apparent truth behind Call of Duty's success, how Modern Warfare was down tremendously a couple of years ago, and also what do you think this means for the future? Really hope you've enjoyed, and peace out, everybody.